Welcome to Puro Politics, the political podcast of the San Antonio Express News. My name is Gilbert Garcia, Metro columnist, and I'm joined by
Metro editor Greg Jefferson.
And it's just going to be the two of us. Carrie and Nancy are they're taking a much-deserved vacation this week, and they'll be
not just the two of us. But, you know.
Yeah, I'm glad you cleared that up. Yeah, well, that's where I'm going with this. But we have a guest who's going to help us make a lot more sense of the recent midterm elections. Laura Barbarena is she's been a familiar guest on our podcast. She's the owner of the political communications firm Viva Politics. She's been a campaign consultant and a campaign manager on tons of successful campaigns in San Antonio, South Texas, and as we're going to talk about today, outside of the state of Texas. Laura, thank you so much for being with us.
It's such a pleasure. I love being here. Thanks for having me again.
You played a major role in two of the biggest races, in two of them successful campaigns, Peter Sakai, who ran for county judge, and Joe Gonzalez, who was reelected district attorney. And I wanted to start with the district attorney's race because that one, you had Mark LaHood. It was a very interesting dynamic. You had Mark LaHood, the Republican candidate, who is the brother of the former DA who Joe Gonzalez beat in a Democratic primary 4 years earlier. And Mark LaHood made a pretty aggressive push to say that Joe Gonzalez had been soft on crime and the concerns that people around the country have about crime. He was really kind of pinning all that on Joe Gonzalez. How did the campaign deal with that argument? And I know you had some concerns about some of the advertising messaging that was coming from the LaHood campaign.
First of all, it did feel a little bit, at least initially, like deja vu all over again because it was LaHood versus Gonzalez. And we were very fortunate that we had this thing called polling. Oh, I love it. We have polling. Polling it really helps in any campaign.
Was it pretty accurate?
Yeah, it was pretty accurate. So we knew going in that we were in a good position in terms of name ID and the possibility of Joe winning it. But it was still a tight margin, and these so-called independent voters, depending on which way they swung, could determine the outcome of the election. And when we did the poll, this was prior to LaHood really getting aggressive on this sort of, the sky is falling and there's murder around every corner and you can blame Joe Gonzalez for that, right? So I was just concerned, and I was a little surprised too that he was able to raise as much money as he did from out-of-state PACs and other folks to really, have that message be out there in the public in a way that I didn't think it could be. So when we had done our initial poll, that message hadn't been out there. So as we started moving forward, I was getting a little concerned, right? Because, we have all seen crime going up, as we've seen it in every city across the nation. So this is not unique to San Antonio. And certainly I don't think you can, put it at the feet of every district attorney across the nation. I think we can get into that conversation about, what are the causes and the proliferation of guns in our society. But so I was a little concerned going into it that maybe we might be facing a more uphill battle than I initially thought.
So how good of a position was he in according to your first poll?
According to our first poll,
the horse race part of it.
Goodness. Like how, you make me. Well, we were like at 40. We weren't quite at 50. So that was the thing that made me worried, right? Okay. So we were like at 48, 49, and we had him down like in the mid 30s. So LaHood in the mid 30s. So again, but with this huge gap of where could these people go, right? I mean, they literally, if they all turned to LaHood, we could be in trouble, right? And then, as you know, and Gilbert and you and I kind of talked about this off air, and it was just this, I don't know what it was about this midterm. For me, just the proliferation of misinformation in a way that I have never seen before, starting from the primary running all the way through November. And I've been doing politics for over 20 years now, and it worries me as not just a consultant, but as an American, that we are normalizing this misinformation. And it concerns me because as someone who works in campaigns, how do we fight back, right? I mean, sort of like the politics 101, when you're hit with a negative ad, you're supposed to respond in the medium in which you're hit, right? So in other words, if I get hit on Facebook, saying that I eat, dead kittens in the backyard, then I should respond that I don't eat kittens in the backyard on Facebook, right? So that way you're not echoing this message to a broader audience. Well, when they start doing it on television, now you're talking about matching literally hundreds of thousands of dollars. And how do you do that, right? And unfortunately, Mark LaHood, and I have to be careful because I don't want to get sued here because I can't call him a liar. But what I can say is that he was, he's spreading misinformation, frankly, false information. And so, I was very concerned, and I was like, what do you do? Right? Well, and I think I was sharing this to you, Gilbert. When I first got into this business, when we would do a television ad, you would submit 4 things: the commercial itself, the script, an NAB form. This is a form that you fill out that's part of how you report who's spending and who's behind the money. And then the last thing was what we called substantiation. So if I made any claim on this television spot, I had to substantiate it with written documentation. If I say that, Greg Jefferson stands against climate change, I have to show where you said that, right? On your website or in a speech. I had to be able to prove that when I submitted my commercial. That doesn't exist anymore. So what's happened
When did that change?
I don't know. Yeah, I was trying to figure this out. I'm like, I'm not sure how this all happened, but it's happening. And I would say definitely in the last, definitely since 2016 for sure. But this is just terribly concerning. And I'll tell you why. Because candidates like Mark LaHood were putting out messages that said Joe did not prosecute fentanyl cases. 100% inaccurate. Absolutely inaccurate. What do I do? What are my choices? Well, first thing is like, all right, I'll call the TV station. I'll say, you're running a false ad. So that's exactly what I did. I called the station manager. I talked to him. I said, hey, this ad is incorrect. Here's the documentation that proves that that Joe actually has prosecuted fentanyl. Here's the cases. In fact, not only are there cases, but they're cases in which Mark LaHood defended the person who was accused of it. So he can't claim that he didn't know about it, right? So then the station manager's like, well, we'll send this up to our attorneys. And I'm like, oh, here we go, right? So then I thought, okay, well, now I'm talking about doing a cease and desist letter, which means involving attorneys, which means paying money, and I'm just like, what is going on here? And then eventually the attorneys got back to me and they cited the Communications Act of 1934 or 39 or something in the 30s and said that because it is candidate speech, we cannot censor it. And I thought, what the hell? Yeah. This is absolutely ridiculous. So I literally can go on air as a candidate and say whatever the hell I want to say. And as a station, you're not going to stop me because you're censoring me? And what is this? What are the implications of this? And what even worries me more is that this is happening on local television, not national television, not at presidential level, at local politics. And we all know that the literature shows that when it comes to local news and local news programming and local station, people really trust those means of communications. And so it was just, I was very frustrated.
What did you do at that point?
At that point, we cut a commercial and put money behind it to say, that's not true. That's all we could do. The same thing happened with the Express News. They ran an ad, and they being SAPOA, ran an ad that was not correct. What do I do? I call Greg Jefferson. Greg, what do I do? And Greg says, well, that's not my department. Let me direct you to whom you need to speak to. So I got to talk to Mark Medici. And I will tell you, throughout this cycle, it was, and I'm not saying that just because I'm here, but Mark listened to me. He took what I had to say seriously. He asked me for certain pieces of information to prove that the ad was actually incorrect, which I provided to him. And then he went back and told the advertiser, which in this case was SAPOA and the Sheriff's Association, your article is false. You need to correct it. And I thought, hallelujah, how simple. That's all I was asking. Just put out accurate information for the public and let the public decide who they want to vote for based on true and accurate information. And I just want to publicly thank Mark for, and I mean, he didn't bend over backwards for me. Don't get me wrong. He wasn't like, sure, Laura, you're 100% right. He just said, look, let's do what's fair. You tell me, show me the information. I will present it to them. I give them an opportunity to respond, and he did so. I personally would have liked the ad to have been actually revised even more so. It wasn't, but Mark did listen to me and did take out what I felt was the most egregious part of the ad.
Yeah.
He took it out. So.
Just for clarity's sake, I should note that she's talking about Mark Medici, our publisher.
Correct.
Publisher of the Express News, which is different from Mark DeVoisin, who is our executive editor.
Right.
Separate thing. We keep, on the news side, it's like a priesthood. And over there, it's anything goes. No. He's our publisher.
Yeah. And so.
One thing that I was curious about what your experiences were with this in this cycle, because it's not a new issue, but I heard people talking about it more this year than I had in the past, which is the issue of Spanish language ads, because a lot of what's put out in Spanish language political ads kind of flies under the radar. A lot of the mainstream media or English language media doesn't. It's not noticed. And I can think of one particular ad from a 2014 campaign, which I won't get into, but it was a local ad that was extreme, and I think we sometimes see just language put across in Spanish language ads with the sense that anything goes. I don't know if that has that been your experience, or did you find that this cycle?
I'd heard about it. We didn't experience too much in the campaigns that we were running, but definitely that's something I think we need to keep our eye on, because I think we talk about these modes of communication that are niche, right? Spanish language. We're talking to a specific audience, and they really just take advantage of that and think that the larger audience isn't going to find out about it. But what we're saying is that people are talking about, like, hey, did you see this ad? Like, people that watch Spanish television also watch English television. So, so they're seeing the different messages and being able to identify the fact that they're different.
In the race for county judge, you had Peter Sakai running against the Republican nominee, Trish DeBerry, and I completely inaccurately predicted that this was going to be a really civil campaign, because I thought there aren't really going to be like huge policy arguments between them. And I think, certainly Peter Sakai is somebody who's respected during his time, his judicial career. And I just didn't think there was going to be a lot of stuff, flying around. But I mean, one issue that came up was there was a dark money ad running against Trish DeBerry, and she accused Thomas J. Henry of being behind the ad, and said that that Peter Sakai knew about it, or she accused him of knowing about it.
She accused us as a campaign team and him of knowing.
She also went after him over a really difficult case that he dealt with many years ago, where you had a young child killed by a mother. It was a case that he dealt with, and which he had talked openly about, and how painful that was for him, and how he really had to reevaluate what he was going to do with his career. It's the kind of thing that nobody could really foreseen if you look at the evidence that he had. I wrote about it. I thought it was a really unfair attack on her part against him. But I'm curious how you dealt with those things which came up relatively late in the campaign.
Well, we knew they were coming. In fact, we kind of had prepped for that. Sort of one of the things I sit with my clients is we actually put together a campaign to beat ourselves, right? Like, what's it going to take to beat us, and what are the messages they're going to use against us? So we knew immediately that particular case was going to be one that they were going to use against us. I'm surprised it wasn't used in the primary, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And when it didn't come over the summer, I thought, okay, maybe it's not coming. Maybe it's not coming. And then I think it was meant to be sort of the October surprise, right? And I think at that point, it was late in the game, first of all, because Peter is a very unique candidate. One, that he's Asian American in a predominantly Hispanic community. Mm-hmm. But when I would be out on the campaign trail with him, and we'd go to a restaurant or go to an event or something, I was just fascinated by the amount of people who'd come up to him and say, "Thank you so much. You saved my daughter's life. You got her out of this, horrible situation. You gave her child back." Now constant stories up until election day. Mm-hmm. We were at Maverick Library, and a woman came up to us, a retired teacher, talked about, "Thank you so much for saving my baby." She starts crying and saying, "You gave my daughter her life back, da 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 da." And I'm just like, wow. So I really think people underestimated the number of people that he touched every single day as a judge, and what those touches meant to families across Bexar County. So when this particular attack came, I knew that I actually talked to him about it, not so much in a campaign sense, but really just like, are you ready for this personally? Like, when you run for office, you put a lot on the line. You sacrifice family, you sacrifice, personal wealth, you've sacrificed a lot. And I was just concerned, emotionally, like, could he handle the fact that, because I knew he struggled with this and he talked about it openly, how he took time off and really debated whether or not he should continue to be a judge after that decision was made. And he decided no, that, he could continue to do better and better things for the community if he stayed on. And I think, I know I could tell it hurt him that she went there, but we knew she was going to go there. I mean, and the ironic thing is, then 2 weeks later, she came out with a commercial with Cindy Cryer that was a testimonial for her. And I was like, why didn't you come out with that one 3 months ago? Like, it was really the best spot Trish ever did, because it was so positive and talked about Trish and, sort of continuing the legacy and da-da-da-da. And I thought, that's interesting that, she decided to close with that. I think that was a much stronger message that she could have led into going in October.
Right. So I think a lot of people were surprised by how bitter the campaign became. But I mean, are you surprised that it took the turn that it did? Because I mean, it seems like if you have two candidates who are very close on most of the issues, one's clearly got, he's kind of clearly the forerunner. Well, what do you expect the other person to do? Yeah. I mean, what were you anticipating from DeBerry? I was expecting a little bit more of civil discourse. I'm not going to lie. Mm-hmm. We say politics is a place for us to mediate our differences, right? There were a couple things that surprised me. One is when she made the Dr. No comment. I know what she was trying to say.
But by the way, did you take that as an ethnic slur? Which must be.
I am a huge James Bond fan, so I immediately recognized what she was making reference to, right? And I also am a James Bond fan that I knew that this character was half Asian, and the fact that it was played by I knew the whole thing because I'm a major James Bond fanatic. Many people didn't know about that, so I'm kind of weird in that way. So I was like, man, that's racist. And everybody was looking at me, what? I'm like, Dr. No, Asian, hello. And they were like, okay. And Peter was like, well, he just took it as sort of name calling, right? So this sort of this Trumpism, which now is a wonderful adjective that we now use in politics, this Trumpinian way of just getting into this name calling, right? Which is really taking political discourse to its very lowest level. And so I expected when we called her out on it that she would do the old, I'm so sorry, I didn't intend it to be racist. What I was trying to say was XYZ and then double down on XYZ. Instead, she doubled down on no, it's not racist, it's not racist, it's not racist. And I just thought, man, have you ever been in an HR class where they talk to you about, sexual, like workplace, what do you call it? Help me. It's harassment. Thank you. Yeah. Like sexual harassment, right? Like, I'm not intending to sexually harass you, but I might say an off-color joke that you then take offensive. And it's not whether or not I intended, it's the way you take it, right? That's what you learn, right? That it's not who says it, it's the receiver, right? And the fact that she just sort of discounted that and was just insistent. And I was kind of surprised by that because I kind of expected her to just double down on what her overall message was rather than double down on the name calling. And she kind of doubled down on the name calling. And I was kind of surprised by that because I expected, Trish is not dumb. She's a very smart, intelligent woman. And I really expected her to take it more towards the criticism that she was making, which was a fair criticism, right? And I feel was definitely within play. It's just the manner in which she took it, I felt was not really appropriate.
I think I've talked about this on the podcast, but about 6 months before the election, there was a meeting of Republican precinct chairs because you had candidates for the county commissioner seat that Trish had vacated. They were all kind of gathering together and kind of making the case for themselves. And you had these precinct chairs, mainly from the north side, all meeting. And Greg Brockhouse, former councilman who was running Trish's campaign, got up and he said, we're going to make history. This is going to be a red wave. She's going to get elected county judge. Mark LaHood's going to win his race. And said, I've been talking to the governor's people, and they think the governor is going to carry Bexar County. And of course, none of those things happened, came close to happening. And it was really kind of given that we had a Democratic president in office and the way midterms generally work, it was remarkable that we didn't, we had in 2014 when we had Barack Obama in the White House, we had a lot of judges, Democratic judges got swept out of office. There was some thought earlier this year that might happen again. When you look at what happened, because Democrats just swept these races and the margins were so close from one race to another. And we talked about this in the podcast, the fact that we don't have a straight ticket voting anymore, but it looked like we did. It looked like an old election where it was just people are like, I'm voting for this Democrat and that Democrat. And what happened what were the big? We've talked about the abortion issue and other things, but what do you think played the biggest role?
I do. Obviously, I think the abortion issue was huge in terms of, honestly, think about this midterm election. What does it matter, right? You think about it to the average person. Mm-hmm. We're kind of political junkies here. So for us, it's like the whole world matters, right? But for most people, it's kind of like, I don't have a transgendered kid, so it doesn't really affect me. Mm-hmm. I don't have a job in oil, so energy doesn't really affect me. So it's like sort of what are these issues really relevant to people? Mm-hmm. And even a little bit on the abortion issue too, because I don't think I do think there's some women obviously who were really ignited by that, and it created a groundswelling. But I think I feel it was more about getting people involved in the process and creating the infrastructure needed to get people out to vote rather than the issue itself, right? So I think that issue got women really invested in the election and said, all right, I'm going to do everything I can to get low propensity voters out, right? Maybe they used the abortion issue. Maybe they used, public education. Maybe they used expanding Medicare, whatever issue they used. But that I think those kinds of issues ignited people to try to get what we call the low propensity voters who don't vote in these midterm elections to vote, right? Because for us, it's like, who are these people that don't vote in midterms? Well, it's a lot of people because it's, really, you're not getting the presidential attention. You're not getting these sort of, we saw a lot of TV commercials, but certainly not like there were in Arizona and other states. But I just think that these kinds of issues are what ignited what I would call like our base folks that, really care about politics and got them invested to get others who aren't invested out, right? So, and to talk to their neighbors and talk to their family members to get them out to come to vote. I think that's what happened.
One of the things that I didn't realize until after Election Day was the role that you played in the campaign of Catherine Cortez Masto in Nevada. She's the Democratic U.S. Senator from Nevada and was, I think, widely seen as the most vulnerable Democratic incumbent in this election cycle. And it was a very close race. She ended up winning, and her victory secured the Democratic majority in the U.S. Senate. You directed ads for were these English language ads or
they're Spanish language ads. So I got to travel to Nevada several times to go out there and direct some commercials, both with folks that were not her, just, Latinos there in the community, but then also I had an opportunity to direct her in a couple of commercials as well. Just a delight to work with, and all in Spanish. And really, I felt like I was out there trying to save democracy. We got a joke. It's like, what do you do, Laura? I try to save democracy. But it was really just a delight to meet her and talk with her. And she's just a really great person, really down to earth. We shot in a Mexican panaderia in Nevada, in Las Vegas, and she actually we got her to eat a piece of sweetbread and smile in the camera, and she was just a delight to work with. So I'm really proud of.
What were the big themes in the ads that you directed?
Really about economics, real economic development, not economic development, but sort of the importance of supporting small businesses. Mm-hmm. We did several spots talking about small businesses and the importance of bringing down those dollars from the federal government to assist small businesses to ensure their viability and helping them get through COVID, really, because a lot of Hispanics are owners of small businesses, and getting through COVID was a real challenge for them. So the fact that she brought down these federal dollars was a huge help. So, but I will tell you, the owners of that panaderia were just so kind. They just gave us all the sweetbread we could eat and then some. It was really wonderful.
She was behind. I mean, if you're watching this, I mean, there were even, I think, optimistic Democrats were really wondering if she was going to be able to overcome that margin. And then as the mail vote started getting counted, it started to turn a little bit, but it was very, very close. I mean, were you a nervous wreck?
Yeah, I was a bit nervous. Also did some work with the governor there, Sisolak, did several spots with him, and unfortunately he fell short. But but yeah, we were all very, very nervous, especially watching Georgia as well and seeing what was going to happen there. But yeah, it's been a real privilege to be able to work on these national campaigns of national importance, and to be able to come in and use my skills as a director and to make sure that we get the commercial we need to get us over the top.
You know, we talked about how Democrats were very successful in Bexar County. The Democrats probably overachieved nationally, although they lost some House seats and lost control of the U.S. House. But Republicans maintain their dominance at the state level. And it's become a really familiar song to Democrats, just this, the high hopes and then losing by, double digits in statewide races. We could probably do several podcasts on this question. So forgive me on this, but it's when you see politically what Democrats, the messaging strategies from Democrats, because that's something that you really specialize in. Where do you think Democrats are falling short on that?
Well, one of the things that I had the opportunity through my work with Emerson College polling to travel across the country this last year and do focus groups with Latinos. Mm-hmm. And not only registered voting Latinos, but also non-registered Latinos who were eligible to vote but just didn't vote. So going around talking to these communities about, what are the most important issues to them? What does it mean to be a good citizen? What do the parties represent to you? And how do they speak to Latinos? And throughout my travels, I was just so shocked, surprised, dismayed that when it came to Republican messaging, they all knew almost verbatim, like they could say verbatim these issues around immigration. Like they would almost verbatim say, I have a house. Why would I leave my front door open and let anyone walk in? Like literally you heard that language across the country. But when it came to Latinos talking about Democrats, there was no cohesive message at all. You never heard them. I never heard once Build Back Better, not a single time. No one ever talked about Build Back Better. No one ever said, wow, I'm really voting for infrastructure. No. Ultimately, and sort of my takeaway, and I'm hoping to write an academic paper on this, is that it just comes down to the economy. And I say economy, me, myself, and I. What does the economy do and affect my life, right? How does it affect me? What does it mean for gas prices? What does it mean for my electricity bill? What does it mean for my groceries? Like that's what people really, really care about. And these are things that Democrats really could have conversations about because they pass the ability to negotiate with pharmaceutical companies. And we've seen them being able to control drug prices, right? But that never came across in any of these focus groups. No one ever talked about sort of this cohesive message of what the Democrats were doing. And I also heard lots of talk about Trump, a little bit about Biden, but Trump is very much the dominating force when it comes to what we think about the Republican brand.
And what were they saying about him?
You're going to love this. They would say things like, well, he's a racist. I don't like what he says, but he's a very successful businessman, and I was doing better when he was president. Things were better when he was president. They would say that. And that was, for me, very insightful because I thought, wow, okay, again, it comes down to the economy, right? When I was paying less at the gas pump when he was president. Mm-hmm. Now he's not president, I'm paying more. Prices are going up. I can't afford a home anymore. Lots of discussions about home ownership and the ability to afford a home, especially in Nevada, in Las Vegas. So
if they were kind of repeating Republican talking points on immigration. Like, how important was immigration to them as an issue? And if it was all about the economy, as you say, like how did they view immigration policy in terms of that?
Well, interestingly enough, it wasn't like, oh, they're helping us and the Democrats are failing us. Mm-hmm. The language that all the groups showed were that both parties were failing them. That what's happening is lots and lots and lots of promises about immigration reform and nothing happening. That was a consistent line throughout the groups, which was both are promising a lot, but few are they're not actually delivering. In Florida, a little bit different. Miami's just a little bit different because you have I think folks are tend to be a little bit more Republican there in the Miami area, so they tended to kind of get into that. If you want to come to this country, you got to get in line. That whole talk about you've got to wait for your turn. That kind of language. That was very prominent in Miami, but in other places it's, hey, we need workers. They should be letting people in. People have a connection to the immigrant community, whether they're family or family members, so they know that there's people that want to come here, to make a better life for their families.
Right. Did any of them mention Governor Greg Abbott's busing of asylum seekers to Washington and New York?
No, that kind of happened a little bit later. Later. Okay. But I will tell you that just for me personally, the fact that he would use Venezuelans as a political pawn is really deplorable to me, that he would do that, that he would use people in that way. And, these are people who profess to be Christians, to be of the Christian faith. And, so it's like, what would Jesus do? Would he send them by bus or plane? Like, come on now. Like, this is not, this is, I think, a very dehumanizing thing that he's doing. And he's really, trying to score political points because he's clearly running for president. So,
well, one of the things that's been reported is that, Beto O'Rourke, was using the busing of undocumented immigrants to other states as, or he was talking about Operation Lone Star, Greg Abbott's immigration program, and he was using that in his advertising, and it really wasn't playing, because people, generally speaking, in the state supported the idea. The idea of this Republican governor being really aggressive in dealing with migrants coming to the border is fairly popular in the state, and it wasn't resonating in the way that Beto O'Rourke wanted, and so he kind of backed off of that. And so, this is probably not something you dealt with in the campaigns you were working on, but I think that's turned out to be kind of a problematic issue because in the state, we saw the same thing with Ron DeSantis in Florida. Many people in the state looked at the idea of him sending people into San Antonio and busing them to Martha's Vineyard, and many people were horrified. But based on the results in Florida, it seemed to play pretty well there.
But, Texas is a big state, as we like to say. It's like a whole other country, right? So, I think what happens along the border of Texas and the attitudes and feelings that people have along the border are very different than what they feel in San Antonio, what they feel in Dallas. And so, I could understand why, Beto may have backed off on that. But I definitely feel that when you appeal to sort of this human aspect of people, the fact that you're using them as political pawns, these immigrants, I think it's just at some point. At some point, when is the moral compass going to kick in? Yeah. And I don't know when that happens. And as I talk about the disinformation earlier, and it's like I feel like this moral compass of politics has just been thrown out the window, and that's very, very concerning to me. Like, at what point do we, who's to say whose morals are right or whose morals are wrong? But I feel like this is all just morally wrong. It just feels wrong. Yeah. I don't know. It just feels wrong. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about the upcoming municipal elections, because you've worked on a lot of those, and we're just beginning to think about those. I think most of us probably assume that Ron Nirenberg is going to have an easy time getting elected to a fourth term. But I wonder if it's kind of early to ask this, but do you see any potential surprises? Do you see any incumbents who could be who could have some challenges?
No, I mean, I think, Ana Sandoval in District 7 hasn't officially announced that she's running for re-election. At least I don't think she's done. I've been gone for a few days, but I don't think she's officially announced. So it'll be interesting to see. She's just had a baby.
She is,
and so
she hasn't announced it, but I think she is.
She is. Okay. Yeah. So that's one that we were kind of watching to see is she going to do it or not do it? And if she weren't to do it, what would that mean for District 7? Obviously in District 1, there's going to be quite a few challengers there. Against Mario Bravo. Yeah. So we're seeing some of that. I've heard rumblings in District 2 against Jalen. There's some possible folks talking over there in that in that area, and of course in 10, wide open at this point. Although I would not discount Perry running. I mean, we've seen the redemption arc more than once in our political lives happen. So
do you think? I mean, okay, so we're talking about District 10 Council Member Clayton Perry, who's been charged with hit and run. He's very likely to be charged with driving under the influence for an accident he caused on the night of November 6th. Does he have? Do you think does he have any kind of political future at all, or is he done?
I don't think he's done. I don't think he's done.
Why not?
Because I've seen other political folks come back from far worse.
Right.
Maybe not locally, but
okay.
I think ultimately it's strange. Voters are strange creatures, right? It's like, well, is he doing his job? Is he, delivering for the community?
Right.
And they can tend to, do a little forgiving or look the other way if they're getting their streets and drainage and things done.
Can they look away from the body cam video that SAPD released of the officer that night interviewing Clayton Perry, who appeared to be intoxicated in his backyard? He had a head wound. The officer found him kind of prone on the ground. Can you come back from that? I mean, it's a pretty powerful piece of video.
It is a very powerful piece of footage, but I would answer your question with a question. And that is.
But I'm not going to answer that. I won't answer that question.
No,
so
he'll answer yours with a question.
Okay, let's do this. See how long we can go. But who votes? Who votes?
Yeah.
Right? If this was a but who votes? Really? Like who in District 10 is voting? And of those people that vote, does that matter to them? Mm-hmm. It may or may not. Right. I don't know the answer to that. He may seek redemption. He may find the help that he needs. I will tell you, just me personally watching that video, and I'm not friends with Clayton, but we're acquaintances. I see him at events and we chit chat and we joke and stuff. It was hard to watch. Yeah. It was just excruciating. And honestly, I didn't want to watch it, but I felt as what I do for a career, like I had to watch it. And it was excruciating. It was awful. It was just the worst thing. But it also seemed like he knew how to answer the questions that were being asked. And I talked to some friends that are in the law enforcement. And I said, do me a favor, watch this. Oh, no, don't watch it. No, just watch it. Tell me what you think. Did this law enforcement officer, because I said, was this privilege or procedure? What was it?
Right.
They watched and said, Lauda, it was procedure. Like the officer did exactly what he was supposed to do. Like, and I asked a couple of folks and I thought, my God, it just, and they would say things like, and he knew exactly how to answer.
Right. So,
and it was just
but you're talking about him saying, no, I didn't do it. I wasn't there. I was here. Or
I was having a good time.
Well, every time they asked, where were you? Asking for locations, he would just stop himself and he would say, I had a good time. Or, and there was some awareness, like I can't say too much.
Awareness there, which makes me even, which I don't know. Can people look away from that? Can they? I mean, this video is pretty damning. But, folks have come away from a lot worse. In fact, we have this joke in the Valley when we used to do I used to do a lot of work in the Valley. So we'd get a client and be like, okay, what's their mugshot look like? Because everyone in the Valley's been arrested. So it was a joke. But the series, like, did they look good in their mugshot? Because, and so people come back from that stuff all the time.
Right. I think there's also a thing, I was just going to say that I think when people are under attack, either by the media or whatever, there's a sense that they're under attack. it can have the effect, you talk about voters being strange, the effect of making people rally around them. I mean, Mario Bravo was getting a lot of criticism from the mayor and others because of the sort of verbal attack that he launched against Anna Sandoval before a council meeting in September. The people who showed up, you didn't have people showing up and saying, how did you should be ashamed, Mario Bravo. They were all defending him. And of course, his parents were among those. But still, with Clayton Perry, people they came and said, well, I'm not happy about what happened, but he's been a good councilman. And there was some sense, somebody told me that when, it's not a comparable situation, but when Elisa Chan many years ago was caught on tape saying some insensitive, to put it mildly, insensitive things about LGBTQ people, she got like thousands of emails of support after that. And again, it's not the same thing as a hit and run. I understand that, but I'm just saying, I think what is common is that both of them were under attack. The media was kind of focusing a lot of attention on it, and there's I think there's something in voters to want to like rally behind that person that they feel everybody's beating up on this person. So I'm going to.
And you can't underestimate his likability. Mm-hmm. He's just a likable guy. Like, even like before this event, obviously we can make different assessments now post this thing happening, but probably he was always such a likable guy, right? And just always full of life. So I don't think you can discount that likability as well.
The fact that he didn't even acknowledge that there was a victim in this case, that he actually struck a car with a human being in it. It took him 8 days to do that, and it was in the context of him trying to kind of blunt the city council vote. Calling for his resignation and a vote of no confidence.
Yeah, I definitely think from a crisis management perspective, it was handled completely wrong and sort of hiding and taking the time, not acknowledging the victim. Like that, there was a lot of problems when it came to how you deal with these crises. So definitely missteps there.
Does that hurt his likability at all?
I don't know. I think time will tell. That's something that will. Yeah, I think as he begins to emerge from this, how will he emerge? Will he emerge someone that shows remorse, or will he be someone that's kind of a little cocky and kind of like, yeah, I got away with it, right? Like I think time will tell. I mean, it's pretty clear Mike Gallagher is going to be. Former Councilman Gallagher is going to be taking his place. I think that's pretty clear. And then the question becomes, will Gallagher run again? Right? He always says, "Oh, I'm not going to run," but come on now. Whether or not he chooses to run again, I think is going to make a big difference in whether or not Perry can have a comeback, right? But again, and his redemption arc could maybe not that he comes back as a council member, but he could come back as anything else. Really, he can
Yeah, and he was actually one of the people interested in running for county commissioner. That Trish DeVere seat that I mentioned. He was at that event that I pointed out. And ultimately, he kind of pulled out of the race toward the end, but he was interested in that.
Right, and again, that commissioner's race will be up again in 2 years because because Trish left. It will come back up in 2 years, and so we'll see an interesting election going on there with the Republicans to see who they end up pulling out as their nominee.
Laura, thank you so much for being on our podcast.
You're welcome. But I brought a gift.
You did well.
But this is supposed to be.
Is this Christmas? Is this?
Well, this only makes sense if Carrie were here. But go ahead and open it.
Okay, you do it.
No. It's your podcast.
Oh my gosh, it's your podcast. Open it.
Okay.
Luis is like, just open it already.
All right.
And
let's see what we got. Oh my God, this is perfect. Okay, anybody who read who read Carrie's recent
Carrie
column
will definitely get that fruitcake because none of us are going to take it.
Anybody who reads Carrie's work and follows him on social media knows how much he's going to love this fruitcake.
No, but we should just like break it open right now, and when he comes back in a week, it'll still be good. So, even if it takes a month off, it'll still be good.
Carrie, hope you're listening and watching, and this is for you.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Take care. Thank you all for listening, and we'll be back next week. Thanks.